And as we saw Trump just finishing up his very long and powerful speech at the Knesset, right before that, he welcomed the hostages home, the 20 living hostages, alongside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. During his speech, it was mostly preaching to the choir to hear them sing. People were chanting Trump, but there was a moment where two members did speak up in some kind of protest. We couldn't really gather what they were saying, but they were very quickly removed. Trump even made a joke about it, saying that was quite efficient, but just so many really poignant moments from that speech.
Reports show that those two people who spoke up were holding signs saying "Recognize Palestine." As you mentioned, they were removed pretty quickly, and he got on with his speech. Very powerful words there, and we'll be tuning back in to more of what's happening there soon.
That's right. And indeed, a historic day in Israel with the hostages returned from Gaza. So much to discuss, and joining us now is Geopolitical Sphere is Dr. Keith Naughton. He's co-founder and principal of Silent Majority Strategies. Keith, we had brought you on initially to talk about China, and I do want to weave in a few questions about that. But first, I'd just like to get your initial reactions to all of the events coming out of Israel this morning.
Well, it's pretty impressive. I mean, I think you had to say since this war started by Hamas had begun, over 2 years ago, you had to wonder whether these hostages would ever be released alive, even up until the final moment. That's a completely untrustworthy group of people, terrorist organization. So, it's a believe it when you see it. So it's very impressive to have these hostages released. I'm surprised so many were still alive. I didn't think any of them would make it out. It's unfortunate that 28 did not. But it's a real credit to the president, what he was able to accomplish. I think it's going to be, it's going to be something that he'll be proud of for a long time. A lot of people will.
And I just want to get your view. Sometimes his style is referred to as transactional, but over his first term and now his second term, he's put in a lot of effort to build relationships with different partners in the Arab Muslim world, really leaning on those partnerships to secure a deal. Potentially for Hamas, the result would have been the same had he not brought in the Arab partners, but of course then the 20 hostages likely would not have survived. So I want to get your view on his consensus building with those partners like Egypt, like Qatar, like Turkey.
Well, I think the one challenge for the president is, he's very impatient, and it takes a lot of time to build these coalitions and to get these kind of deals made. And it's important to build partnerships. It's hard to go alone. The United States has had a lot of problems with untrustworthy partners in the past, so that's definitely something that I think he's attuned to. So I think from this process, I think maybe the president has added a dimension of patience to his negotiating style. There's something you said up front that I really can't stand, that criticism of transactionalism. Of course we are. Every country is. That's the whole point. The United States isn't the largest charity organization in the world. I mean, we are a democracy, and the president's supposed to represent the interests of the American people. And that involves transacting with the world stage to the benefit of this country. And when we engage in charitable efforts, that's just a bonus. So there's nothing insulting in any way about transactional. In fact, it's the whole point of being a democracy.
And of course, now as we speak, we're looking at this footage, people dancing in the streets. And he said they're not only dancing in the streets in Israel, but in places all around the world, places that you would not expect. And he credited a large portion of this success with Steve Witkoff. I'd like to get your comment on Steve Witkoff's style and ability to be a diplomat, having not come from that world, having been in business and in real estate. But Trump said he saw some qualities in him that would lend very well to deal-making and peacemaking in diplomacy. Your thoughts?
Well, if you can cut deals in New York real estate, I think you can cut deals anywhere in the world. So I think that's probably a smart dimension to have. I think the important thing when you're dealing internationally is having people who are tough negotiators, who have the interests of the United States and our allies in mind, and to know how to cut deals. And I think if you combine that with people with experience in the region, that's a very powerful thing. I don't think we've had that in the past. And one thing that Trump has made a point of since back in 2016 is we've done a very poor job of cutting good deals for the United States, particularly the Obama administration. They were one of the worst in American history. So I think having someone like Witkoff as part of your team makes a lot of sense. And I think he's, went up a learning curve, but I think he's had a great success here.
Yeah, and he told an anecdote jokingly about sending him to meet with Putin, thinking it would be a 30-minute meeting, and it was like a 4 to 5 hour meeting, and just saying that Witkoff has this uncanny ability to befriend people, and Trump said hopefully Russia would be the next deal, and certainly something that everybody is looking at closely, though today you have this moment of joy. But I want to dovetail to Russia and China, because it seemed like out of nowhere, China escalated this trade war with the U.S., basically saying even if the rare earths don't initially exist in China, that they wanted to put export controls. What do you think of the timing? It pretty much happened on the same day that this breakthrough with Israel and the Arab partners pressuring Hamas. Why would China pick that day to ultimately create this new trade escalation?
Well, they want to rain on his parade. Cannot be trusted. I'm not surprised at all that they would do this. There is no deal that you can cut with them, with the CCP, that will ever be held. Whenever they feel like violating a deal, they're going to do it. You've got no choice but to find ways to keep pressure on them. That's the only way to keep these deals going. I think China's been working, and Xi Jinping, for the last 15 years to become as self-sufficient as possible for their regime. And the more self-sufficient they are, the more that they're going to act this way. Under President Obama, the United States was completely asleep, allowed an enormous amount of technology to be stolen, did not prepare this country to be resilient in the case of any trade disruptions. Trump has started the process of making the country more independent. I actually think he needs to be more aggressive, and I think he needs to do more than just tariffs. He's got to have a more broad strategy, but no one should believe that any deal with China is going to last ever. That should be just a number one fact. So I wasn't surprised at all.
Yeah, he used the word in his truth post. They were always laying in wait. So he was expecting them to potentially make moves, as you said, to sort of rain on the parade of what appears to be his intention to put out conflicts around the world. It seems like the China strategy is to engulf the U.S. in conflicts, potentially having to take their eye off the ball of the theater with Taiwan. How has peacemaking put more pressure on China, in your view?
Well, I think they are humiliated because they haven't been able to achieve anything in the Middle East. There was a brief time where they allegedly brokered some agreement between the Saudis and the Iranians, but that was just like a piece of paper. That really didn't mean anything. They have no diplomatic heft like the president does. So I think it is embarrassing to them that they've got, no one's really interested in their opinion in the Middle East. They just want to sell their oil to China. So I think Xi Jinping wants to be on the world stage, but he's not really on the world stage because he doesn't have the gravitas of the president.
And then China being the major underwriter of Russia's war with Ukraine by being the largest purchaser of their oil, but by no means the only. Certainly India buying a lot, and even members of the NATO alliance, as Trump criticized, still buying some oil and gas. So as we finish up, Dr. Naun, I just want to get your view on what the next steps could look like in managing that situation in the Russia-Ukraine war. Do we send in the Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine? How does Trump navigate that?
Well, yeah, and I wrote about this 2 years ago in the American Spectator. I mean, the Russians are never going to stop, or Putin won't, that's for sure. They're fighting a war exactly like the Russians have fought for 500 years. Their behavior hasn't changed. It never will change. I don't think this war is going to end until Putin has left. No Russian leader or czar has survived losing a war. Wars end when they win or when the leader who starts it leaves the stage. As far as the tomahawks go, I don't think the president should be announcing these things. I mean, he shouldn't be publicly debating what to send into Ukraine. They need to do these things privately, because the problem is you humiliate Putin publicly when you ignored him. Biden did this all the time. He talked about sending Ukraine aid. The Russians would make a big deal about it. Then he'd send it anyway. Well, now you've humiliated the Russians. You've made them want to retaliate more against you. You sort of raise the temperature. If you're going to provide more weapons, more advanced weapons, you have to do it quietly to help the Ukrainians defend themselves. So I don't agree with that strategy at all. But I think in the end, it's very intractable. I think the best we can hope is to just sort of tamp down a little bit of the aggression and limit it to this war until Putin leaves the stage, and then there'll be an opportunity to make peace.
We appreciate you joining and sharing your insights with us on this historic morning. Dr. Keith Naughton, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to have those insights there from Dr. Naughton. As you mentioned, as you can see in this footage here, what a historic time we're observing. People out in the streets in Israel flying the American flag alongside the Israeli flag, and we've seen the American flag plastered up writ large on many buildings around Israel there as well, celebrating what is the first phase of hopefully a much more extensive peace deal in Gaza.
That's right. You bring up an important point. While it is a historic and celebratory day in Israel and around the world, potentially the harder part now comes in getting Hamas, while getting 2,000 of their own people released, many of them murderers committing acts of terror, to getting them to lay down their weapons, disarm, and allow the money to flow in from those Arab partners, as Trump is, painting this vision in his speech to the Knesset of a very prosperous, rebuilt Gaza Strip.
That's it. And I think we just saw President Trump in the air departing to Egypt, where he will continue his historic trip there in the Middle East. As you mentioned, President Trump in his speech just earlier really hailing this as the beginning of the golden age of Israel and also the golden age of the Middle East. But he did say that getting to even this point was almost miraculous, that it was tough, was his words, so tough. And as we know, and as we've heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the opposition leader Yair Lapid, and also Trump just speaking all today to the Knesset, saying that so many pieces had to fall into place to make even this first phase come true, or come to fruition.
Yeah, and he was certainly generous with his praise, lavishing praise on his own team. Huge praise for Steve Witkoff and his central role in this process. His own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who he says was the original architect of the Abraham, or as he joked, the Avraham Accords, which he says it sounds better to say it in Hebrew, the Avraham Accords. And he says Jared Kushner loves Israel so much that his own daughter converted, and he had a laugh about that, that his own grandchildren are Jewish. But really just talking about Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, General Dan Kane, all playing pivotal roles. And as we heard from all of the speakers on the Israeli side, really a key moment was the striking the Fordo nuclear facility, which then began a new opportunity for Arab leaders to step forward now that the threat of Iranian sponsoring of Hezbollah and the Houthis, that real threat of having that nuclear weapon just very close to being activated. He said that they all said that was really a major turning point in this whole conflict over the last 2 years. And
the other Arab nations playing significant role in the negotiations this time, even though the deal is just between Israel and Hamas. We heard earlier President Trump, during his speech to the Knesset, calling on Iran, saying, "We're ready when you are." I assume he was saying to accept Israel for what it is and its sovereignty, and imploring Iran to recognize it and saying that will be the best decision for Iran. promising basically prosperity for the entire Middle East if this can really be seen through to the end and Israel gets to just feel no threats there, which it has felt throughout the ages, really.
That's right. And, one of the interesting elements that came through in his speech was that the whole world was really criticizing the policy of Israel taking the fight into Gaza, which was Hamas's main stronghold, because of the casualties, because of the displacement of people, but that it was the only way to secure the release of the hostages was to bring the pressure directly on Hamas, and then from the outside, the diplomatic pressure, bringing the Israeli pressure on the ground, and then the diplomatic pressure where Qatar and Turkey saying we're no longer going to give you this support, to put that pressure onto Hamas. Bibi or Benjamin Netanyahu clearly taking criticism in the UN just a month earlier for this campaign, but now Trump praising him for having the courage to do what he felt was the only way to get to this day today.
Yes, it'll be interesting to see how other nations not so close by react as the negotiations progress. As we know, and as Trump had noted, many leaders had begun to assert their positions on whether there should be a Palestinian state or not. But of course, the rest is potentially touch and go at the moment. But we do see that helicopter there potentially carrying the president. We've got much more coming up. President Trump set to take part in a Middle East peace ceremony following the peace plan agreement between Israel and Hamas.
And this is, of course, after Trump just gave this historic speech in front of the Knesset, that, of course, Israel's parliament earlier today, as well as the release of all the remaining living hostages by Hamas. We have a lot more. We're going to be covering this all day. Stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Here you're watching President Trump now signing the guest book at the Knesset. That was earlier today. He's in Jerusalem, and he's just departed Jerusalem, indeed, for Egypt. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli officials were watching on at that point. The president spent several seconds writing, then he held up what he wrote. It read, "This is my great honor. A great and beautiful day, a new beginning."
And the Knesset staff earlier handed out red baseball caps, as we just saw in the footage, in the style of the Make America Great Again caps, the MAGA caps, the words reading, "Trump, the Peace President." As Trump walked through the Knesset with Netanyahu and Speaker Ohana, news broke that all 20 living hostages had been freed.
Knesset Speaker Ohana and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the assembly in a special session convened in Trump's honor. Trump's speech followed theirs.
And before this, only 3 U.S. presidents have ever addressed the Israeli parliament. President Jimmy Carter in 1979, President Bill Clinton in 1994, and President George W. Bush in 2008. And the 20 living hostages were released to the IDF. The IDF confirmed that there are no more living hostages in captivity, and 4 of those bodies are expected to be released today, according to the Hostages and Missing Families Forum.
Here's Trump earlier today.
We gather on a day of profound joy, of soaring hope. After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil for all of time. After so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity. This is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
President Trump arrived in Israel to a warm and symbolic welcome earlier this morning as his historic Middle East peace mission enters a new phase.
That's right. His visit comes amid celebrations, dancing in the streets after hostages were released under the ceasefire that he helped to broker. NTD's Dana Monahan has more on the hostage release.
A grateful nation displayed a massive sign thanking President Trump on the beach in Tel Aviv, which Air Force One saw as it approached Ben Gurion Airport. The president's plane was welcomed to Israeli airspace by an airport control tower.
Welcome to the State of Israel, Mr. President. Your visit carries deep meaning for our people in these times. Thank you for our friendship and the unbreakable bond between our nations. God bless America, God bless Israel, and the friendship between our peoples.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt shared a view aboard Air Force One as President Trump approached Israel, calling it a new dawn in the Middle East. Another view from the plane flying over the beach in front of the U.S. Embassy branch in Tel Aviv. A red carpet welcome awaited Trump, who walked with Prime Minister Netanyahu on the tarmac as live music played in the background. Trump's motorcade later departed Ben Gurion Airport en route to Jerusalem. The president spoke with reporters before departing for Israel, calling it an honor to be involved in something so momentous.
This is a very special event. They had 500,000 people yesterday and today in Israel, and also the Muslim and Arab countries are all cheering. Everybody's cheering at one time. That's never happened before.
Aboard Air Force One, the president said this is the first time when everybody is unified.
Because as you know, we're going to Egypt after Israel, and we're going to meet all of the leaders of the very powerful and big countries and very rich countries and others, and they're all into this deal. Everybody's into it. It's never happened before.
Trump made it clear that the conflict was finished.
War is over. The war is over, okay? Do you understand that?
The president says cleaning up the ruins of the war in Gaza will begin immediately.
This is like a demolition site. Almost the entire site is. So you have to get rid of what you have there. You have structures that are very dangerous. They're falling down. If they haven't fallen, they're going to fall down of their own volition.
Trump says the Board of Peace, an international governing body, will be in place in Gaza very soon.
Everybody wants to be a part of it. I've had calls from all of the leaders of countries. They all want to be a part. I mean, the leaders themselves, they're not going to send somebody. They want to be a part of it.
Trump was asked whether this peace deal would help him get to heaven, a reference to an earlier statement he made.
I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I may be in heaven right now as we fly in Air Force One. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven, but I've made life a lot better for a lot of people.
The Hamas terror group had earlier released the names of the hostages to be released under the first phase of a ceasefire agreement with Israel. The Israeli military says all 20 have already been released after 738 days in captivity in Gaza. They are being reunited today with their families. Crowds broke into cheers after an announcement that hostages had been released into the custody of the Red Cross. Emotional scenes as crowds in Hostages Square gathered to watch the release of hostages, thanking President Trump for his dedication to their release.
Thank you, Trump! Thank you, Trump! Thank you, Trump!
Shock, jubilation, disbelief, and joy. Matan Engrest's family celebrates as he is released. Friends and family members of Israeli hostages Nimrod Cohen and Alan Ohel gathered at separate viewings to wait for their release from Hamas captivity today. Cohen, now 20, was a conscript when he was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists from his burning tank near the Israeli border with Gaza. 24-year-old Ohel, a pianist, was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival. Alan was wounded by a grenade thrown into a bomb shelter where he had taken cover and has gone blind in one eye, according to his family. Israeli prison services also prepared for the release of Palestinian prisoners today as part of the peace deal. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Great report there from Daniel. Now joining us to talk about this historic day in the Middle East is Karen Shalom Levin, Executive Director of the Baltimore Zionist District. Good to have you with us today, Karen. As an Israeli American, you're in touch with people over there. What's your sense of people's reactions on the ground there?
I think it's overwhelming excitement. It was a hard night. It was for last night, obviously for us here in the United States. It was just holding your breath for an entire 24 hours of not knowing what to expect, not knowing if Hamas was going to change their minds, not knowing if actually 20 hostages were going to come home, not knowing if what their condition was going to be, and it was an entire nation just holding their breath, and then this sigh of relief from an entire nation when the announcement was made that the 20 hostages were back on our soil, back on our land, and with our IDF forces.
Yeah, you make such a good point about the connection as well between the U.S. here as well. People here feeling it. Your organization aims to connect the community of Baltimore with Israel. How are people here in the U.S. reacting?
It's like I said, it's such a sigh of relief. I think that a lot of people feel like today is October 8th. There's something that goes around where every time it's October 7th, whether it's October 7th, November 7th, 2020, 2023, 2024, 2025, we always say it's still October 7th. Today is October 8th. It's finally this sigh of relief of it's finally October 8th. It's something that should have happened October 8th, 2023. And of course, we know that the battle is not over, the fight is not over. But for today, it feels like October 8th. Our hostages are home. Our people are home from the depths of hell. And we are taking this as a win. That is what the Jewish community, what the Jewish people are all about, is our people, our family. We needed their home, and our hearts would never have been full. We would never have been full as a nation without having our family home.
Now let's look a little closer at this next phase. Trump has forecast the ushering in of a golden age for Israel and for the Middle East. How possible is that vision that might come true in your hopes and in your sense of what's practical?
Listen, my hope is that it comes to fruition. I'm a realist. I grew up in Israel, and I have been seeing the same cycle of violence, of indoctrination, of what goes on in Gaza for many, many years. The terrorism on the Israeli people, the crossing the borders, and the bus bombings, and the bombings at restaurants. And when Trump spoke today and he said the war is over, peace is here, I want to believe that. And just like I wanted to believe that the hostages were going to come home, I did believe that. And I'm so grateful for President Trump, for the IDF, for Bibi, for Jared Kushner, for Witkoff, for the administration, for everything that they did to bring our hostages home. And I do pray with everything inside me that we will see peace in the Middle East, as we've been saying for a very long time. And that is my hope, and that is my prayer. And I will keep wishing for that, and I will keep advocating for that, and I will keep fighting for that. So will our organization. And that is what we do. And we hope for the best.
So Karen, talk to us about the unique place of Israel in the Middle East and also to the U.S.
Israel to me is as they say, Jerusalem of gold. To me, it's the golden place in the Middle East. There is nowhere more beautiful. There's nowhere that you can be more free. There's nowhere that you can go and just say, I'm home. And the sights are incredible. You need to go see there to meet with the people, not just the Jewish people. Of course, they call it the Jewish homeland, but there are 2 million other people that live in Israel that are Muslims, that are Druze, that are Christian, and the society is the most coexistent society that one could ever travel to. And it's more than a land, more than a people. It's history. It's just an incredible place to go and to try and understand what you see on the media and on the social media. You need to go and see it for yourself and visit for yourself and understand that Israel is a holy place and is a mysterious place and is a historical place. And I would love for everybody to know that and to go see that for themselves.
I really hear your love for this nation, and just
I love
noting
it.
is, yeah, and also interesting to note here, President Trump in his speech to the Knesset today, just proclaiming that Israel will become even more loving, and to just call a nation loving is not something you hear every day, but I can see the love coming through for the people and for everything it stands for right here. And at the same time,
Israel is a place of love.
yeah, and I think what we're seeing is a celebration of the shared values between the two nations, the U.S. And Israel, and everybody else who's kind of signed on to this hope for peace there. But at the same time, in the U.S. and around the world, in the past 2 years, we have seen increased incidences of anti-Semitism and kind of like hate crimes driven by what might be seen as the conflict happening there in Gaza. Yes. What's your message for Americans at this time?
Yeah, listen, unfortunately, the past 2 years have taken a toll, not only on Israel with the war and with the constant bombings and with the constant hostility towards Israel, but in turn, that did take a tremendous effect on the Jewish people in the diaspora. It has given the opportunity for those who were hiding their very anti-Semitic views towards Jewish people, I would say for probably the past 80 years since the Holocaust, to now come out and freely express their views towards Jews and towards, as they like to call it, Zionists, and just express how they feel on streets, on college campuses. I have it right here in my neighborhood. Without really understanding who Jewish people are, or who support Israel and the homeland for the Jewish people, which is what a Zionist is. I think it's gotten to a point where it's severely bad. Anti-Semitism is up by over 400% across the board. I think that the Jewish people, the Jewish community, our allies, we're going to have a lot of work to do to clean up the horrific anti-Semitism that has risen over the past 2 years as a result of the war in the Middle East. And it's nothing that the Jews have not fought before.
To that point, President Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, and others have noted the role of the surrounding Arab states in this particular phase of the deal, coming together, perhaps changing their stance, softening their stance. Some of them had been amenable to or cooperative with Hamas and thus supporting their operations in some way, directly or indirectly. But this potentially could be the start of something new. What do you see happening there in terms of the dynamics of the surrounding Arab nations and their attitudes toward Israel?
I haven't seen many statements from the Arab nations. I think it's really going to take the Arab nations coming together and really implementing something big within, if we're talking about within the Gaza Strip. Within the Gaza Strip, it's going to have to start with education. The Gaza Strip and Hamas and the ideology is indoctrination from a very, very young age. I mean, you have very young kids walking around with guns and singing songs about, killing Jews at a very young age of 3 or 4. There was just videos yesterday, after the ceasefire obviously had already taken place, about, wanting to kill Jews, or now it's time to go back and claim Israel. So, even though there was a ceasefire, you see, Jewish people on one side and Israel celebrating their hostage, our people, our hostages coming home and dead bodies coming home. And on the other side, you see, Gazans wanting to still kill Jewish people and reclaim their land. So it's a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work. And I do think that Arab nations are going to have to take a big part in this. I don't think that the Jewish people alone in the state of Israel are going to be able to do this.
Well, it's an honor to witness this day and to be able to share it with you and observe something truly historic taking place, regardless of what happens here on out. But we certainly hope that it only gets better. Thank you so much, Karen Shalom Levin. Good to speak with you.
Thank you.
And President Trump today will co-chair a summit in Egypt aimed at officially ending the war in Gaza. I had said earlier that he was on his way to Gaza, but he is just about to leave that he was on his way to Egypt, but he's just about to leave for Egypt now. Now, the meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh brings together more than 20 world leaders, among them British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. The summit is expected to focus on phase 2 of the Trump peace plan, setting up an international stabilization force for Gaza. Key questions remain: how large that force will be, what mandate it will have, and whether it will carry UN approval. For Israel, the priority is ensuring Hamas no longer poses a threat, while Palestinians look for guarantees of Israeli withdrawal and steady humanitarian access. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi will co-chair the summit with President Trump. And we'll go to a quick break now. Stay tuned, because we'll be covering that event live here on NTD Good Morning. See you soon.
And welcome back to NTD Good Morning. A historic day. Right now we're looking at the motorcade bringing President Trump to the airport in Israel, where he will next travel to Egypt, where he'll be joined by many world leaders from Germany, from England, and of course all of the Arab states, as they look to now implement the next stages. Now that the prisoners, the hostages have been released, the 20 living hostages have returned home safely to Israel.
Yes, and we heard Trump earlier today giving his speech to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament there, saying that numerous world leaders wanted to take part today and meet with him for that historic ceremony and meeting in Egypt.
That's right. And we'll take a listen to some of the quotes coming out of Trump's speech earlier today.
We gather on a day of profound joy, of soaring hope. After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil for all of time. After so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity. This is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death, and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
And joining us now to talk about the peace deal is Brian Leib. He's a foreign policy analyst and the CEO of Henry Public Relations. What a historic morning so far, obviously, with the time difference. You wake up and all of these things have unfolded. Your initial reactions?
Carrie, it's a beautiful day, I think, for all of us, and all of us as Americans should be very proud of our president and of the administration and everyone involved in bringing these hostages home, regardless of one's political opinions. And I know we're a country full of many of them, but this is a beautiful day for all of us to see these hostages come home and to know that it was because of American leadership and because of President Trump's leadership that helped make it happen. And I've been up since 3 a.m. I watched the speech live. I think that was, listen, I've heard a lot of President Trump's speeches, both in person and on TV. That will probably go down in the history books as one of his best speeches ever, from a strength perspective, from a compassion perspective. It was a great speech, and it's a truly amazing morning that we're waking up to right now.
Yeah, if you get the sound bites, as we just played, of President Trump's speech, or you watch the long form, it almost has a completely different feel, very graciously laying praise on many of the people in the room responsible for coming to that moment. I'd like you to comment a little bit on his words about Bibi, about Witkoff, about Kushner, and as well Marco Rubio.
I mean, he singled out a lot of people throughout that speech, and I think that's very much who President Trump is. That's maybe not what some of the media want people to think he is, but that's the kind of leader that President Trump is. There's a lot of talk, by the way, Carrie, about this Nobel Peace Prize. Can I tell you something? I don't think President Trump really even cares about the Nobel Peace Prize. I think it would be great if he got it, but I don't think he needs it, because I think at the end of the day, and he has said this many times, and I believe it, peace is the ultimate prize. And now we're in a position where we are on the cusp of really some long-lasting peace. And he shared the stage. He shared this moment with his son-in-law, with Jared Kushner, with Steve Witkoff, with Marco Rubio, with all of his people, because listen, it can't just be one person, that gets this done, whether it was on our side, the Trump administration, or Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ron Dermer and so many other people on the side. This took a real teamwork, a real team effort. And I think that's why we were able to get to this moment, that we're at today, where the hostages are now home. They're being reunited with their families. And now President Trump is going to Egypt to have what could be a massive Abraham Accord signing. I mean, time will tell with what happens very soon. But we are very much on the cusp of really a new dawn in the Middle East. It's because of President Trump and his partnership with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, one thing that President Trump mentioned specifically about himself and Netanyahu was the endurance and the perseverance through very sharp criticism on the military actions into Gaza City, the pressure campaign on Hamas. Of course, Trump then did an end around diplomatically with all of the Arab countries to put pressure on Hamas, not just militarily, but also diplomatically. I want to get your take, though, on that perseverance that it took. Just last month at the UN, it seemed like the entire world was against Israel, but they stayed the course and ultimately got the result that they were hoping for.
I mean, I think if we're being honest, I think a lot of the world still is against Israel, and they probably, always will be. That's kind of, been how it's been for a long time now. But you're right. It definitely took perseverance, and it took two strong leaders to stay the course. And there's been a lot of fake news out there, and a lot of fake headlines about how Trump and Bibi have had many falling outs, and they weren't talking to each other, and Trump was cursing at Bibi. None of that was true. And at the end of the day, these are two men that were deeply committed to bringing the hostages home, to ending this conflict, to creating a new day of peace in the Middle East. And I don't think this could have been possible with anyone else. The two of them working together, Kerry, with Trump and Netanyahu, it's a really special partnership that I don't think we've ever really seen in politics, at least that I've seen in my lifetime. So they were persistent, they were strong, and that's what got this done.
Trump is calling this the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East, kind of piggybacking off of his theme for peace through strength and his policy in America. I want to get your view on the next stage. You know, the first point or two of a 20-point plan has been realized, but Trump has really done a lot of work with Qatar, with the United Arab Emirates, with the Abraham Accords. What does the potential for truly demilitarizing the West Bank and Gaza and going more toward a, what he would call like the golden age, something where, there's mass construction, there's thriving communities, there's economic opportunity and education for Palestinians?
Well, there's a lot to build on. The Abraham Accords was wildly successful, and I think President Trump even made a comment during his speech about, how throughout the last 2 years, the Abraham Accords have remained intact. The countries that were involved, like the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, they never severed ties with Israel and continued forward with the Abraham Accords. So I think that the groundwork has been laid for more normalization, and it definitely is the golden age. I mean, but we have to be honest with ourselves and speak the truth about the situation, and that none of this is going to be able to happen if Hamas is not disarmed. If the radical elements that are in the West Bank or anywhere else in the Middle East, if they're not disarmed, we're going to keep kind of going back to the well on this. So I think that we're finally at a point now where these countries are willing to come together. They're willing to make peace. And I'm watching the live shot now, and it looks like President Trump is coming back, and he's going to be on his way to Egypt. So, and I mean, the countries that he's assembled for this is really mind-boggling. So, again, the groundwork is there, Carrie, with the Abraham Accords, and now it's just time to build on top of that. And I think these two leaders, along with Arab leaders, I think they can get it done.
And I'm very excited to observe and talk about this next phase. But I do want to go back to the Israeli speeches made thanking Trump for taking out the Fordo facility. There were many steps along the way to even have the opportunity to have this moment come to fruition. I want you to discuss the importance of taking out the Fordo facility.
Well, it's more than just that. I mean, the Fordo facility and the other Iranian nuclear sites, and also crippling a lot of the Iranian infrastructure. As the president said, that was very important. If the Iranian regime still had the resources that they've had for the last couple of years, it might not be possible to be at a point where we're at right now. If the Iranian regime was as strong as they were, perhaps Hamas, who, by the way, their main funder is the regime in Tehran, maybe they would have kept holding on and wouldn't have made any moves like they're making now. So I think the president's entirely correct. Eliminating the Iranian regime is a big thing, and it's hopefully going to create the runway now for a lot of these Arab countries. Who, by the way, the quiet part out loud, Carrie, is that the Israelis have had warm ties with a lot of these Arab countries for a long time now, but it's always been in the darkness, behind the scenes. Saudi Arabia is a perfect example of that. The Israelis and the Saudis have been cooperating for years together. So I think that now the runway is there, especially with the Iran regime neutered as they are, to really see this lasting peace take root.
Yeah, and as we're discussing this, we see President Trump about to board Air Force One, saying his parting words of appreciation to the Netanyahu family, getting set to go, as you said, join quite a panel of countries that he's put together in Egypt. What do you expect to happen today, particularly at these meetings?
I really don't know. I mean, it's such a new world that we're living in, where you have Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Azerbaijan and all these other Muslim countries that are all coming together for this peace summit. But I think one thing for sure, and I think President Trump previewed this a little bit in his speech, he is going to be calling on them to officially recognize the state of Israel and to normalize relations with the state of Israel. I think he very much wants to build on the Abraham Accords that were wildly successful. And that really is the best way, I think, for all these countries to come together, is to recognize that everyone has the right to exist and focus on ways that they can partner together, from intelligence sharing to business to commerce to trade, all of the above. So I don't. Yeah, it's such a new moment in time where President Trump going to Egypt with 20 plus countries. No one knows what's going to happen. But I think we can all be very confident that President Trump is going to be looking to call on these Arab countries to officially recognize Israel, lay down their arms, and make this lasting peace that we all hope can happen.
Yeah, when you think about Trump referenced the extraordinary wealth that is in the Middle East, when you think of the thriving cities of Doha and Dubai, and how that wealth is just a drop in the bucket to what the total amount of wealth there is, what are the prospects of a rebuilt Gaza? What could that become?
I think everyone is on board to rebuild Gaza, but it goes back to a previous comment that I made that none of this is going to be possible unless Hamas is removed and unless Hamas is disarmed. None of these Arab countries, in my opinion, are going to invest a single cent into Gaza, nor will we as the Americans invest any money if Hamas remains in any kind of leadership position. So that's really kind of the elephant in the room right now, and that's the next stage of the deal. We've all been laser focused on getting the hostages back, and that's amazing. And now we have to see, how Hamas disarms, whether it's peacefully or not. And I think that's kind of the elephant in the room right now, and what we all should be looking to see in terms of what happens next.
Yeah, how will they be disarmed? How will the PLA change its ways and no longer, it's reported that they pay the families of those who martyr into terrorist acts. So how does that change? Money alone, of course, doesn't solve that, because it's money that built all those tunnels underground instead of building schools and hospitals and all the things that a thriving democracy depends on. But it seems like this, if there ever was an opportunity to break the cycle, this appears to be that moment. Besides Trump and Egypt, who are the key players in your view to get to realize much of what Trump's 20-point plan is offering?
Well, I think the UAE and Saudi Arabia are going to play big roles. And I also want to shine a quick little spotlight on the country of Azerbaijan. I was just in Azerbaijan actually just last week for the first time ever. It's a Muslim majority country, but it's a very moderate country. And they play a very special role in supporting Israel and being a bridge between Israel and some of the Arab countries. So I think I think Azerbaijan could potentially play a really big role here in bringing potentially Turkey and maybe some other countries along here, and Turkey as well. I mean, Turkey's a big country, can play a really big role here. So there's a lot of different countries, Arab countries, that can really come together to make this happen. But I think we're going to see UAE, Saudi Arabia, also the Qataris as well. The Qataris are going to want to have a big seat at the table. So we'll see. It's going to be quite the moment here in a couple hours when President Trump is wheels down in Egypt for the next summit.
Indeed, and one unique characteristic of President Trump is, if you look at a country like Qatar, known to have hosted Hamas leadership, allowed them to live lavish lifestyles in their hotels and casinos, and then you think of a country like Turkey, where the leader there, someone who controversial, if nothing else, but Trump found a way to bring them into the fold and not sort of look at their faults, but look at the opportunities. How has his approach been different than previous leaders of the country, of America?
I think he's been successful because well before President Trump entered politics, he was a deal maker. And to be able to be a deal maker in New York City, of all places, sometimes you have to make compromises. Sometimes you're sitting across the table with other people that you really wouldn't want to be sitting across the table, but you have to make a deal. So I think President Trump brought that expertise into the first administration as the 45th president, and now in the 47th administration as well, just taking a different approach to things. When you try and shove a square peg into a round hole over and over and over again, you're going to get the same result. And I think what we saw with President Trump with the Abraham Accords is that he tried a different approach, and that approach worked. So you're going to see the same thing happen now. And at the end of the day, the guy's a deal maker. The guy's a relationship builder. He knows how to bring people together. He has a lot of skills, but I think probably one of his most powerful skills is relationship building and being able to bring people together.
Yeah, and as we see him just enter Air Force One, and now we see Jared Kushner and daughter Ivanka Trump boarding Air Force One. I want to reflect just a moment before we move on to what this day in Israel meant. We saw people holding, flags with Trump, reconfiguring the MAGA hat into a, Trump and peace hat. People were highly divided in Israel about the way to achieve all their goals, which was security, but also some people were willing to give up some security guarantees just to get the hostages home. And to get both of those things, it seems like, with the exception of the two hecklers in the Knesset who were swiftly removed, a very unified Israel today. And what are your observations on that? And does that continue? It's politics are brutal everywhere. What does the future of Israel look like?
Politics, you're right, politics are brutal everywhere. I think that this certainly is a moment for the Israeli people, regardless of their political affiliations, for all of them to come together and have a moment of unity. I think it's very similar, if I could draw a quick comparison, to how we as a country came together after the 9/11 attacks. There was so much unity throughout our country. I think you'll see a lot of that in Israel, but politics is politics, and at the end of the day, there's certain people inside of Israel that really do not like Netanyahu, and listen, we have the same thing here in America. But I think this is a joyous day. It's an amazing day. Earlier on a different network, I took this pin off. I've been wearing this pin on my lapel pin for 2 years now on national television and speaking engagements, and it was because of President Trump that I was finally able to take this pin off, because the hostages are home. So I think we should all be just very happy and very grateful that President Trump played such an amazing role, and that we as the American people also played such an amazing role to make this happen, to bring these hostages back together. It's a beautiful day, beautiful day.
Yeah, and on college campuses, there are all these divestment of Israel campaigns because of the war in Gaza, in Hollywood as well, and we sort of have come to a new place. Do you expect all the flights to return to Israel? Many of airlines, canceled their flights. One of the greatest technology centers and pharmaceutical centers, Israel, does, with all those people in the military hopefully getting back into civilian life, what does relations and economics look like between the U.S. and Israel now that, as you've taken that pin off your own lapel, what comes next?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's going to continue to be strong. I mean, relations from all aspects between the U.S. and Israel have remained very strong, and they're going to keep getting stronger. So it's a moment for, I think, for all of us as Americans and Israelis to just really come together and celebrate what's happening. And the nonsense that's been happening on our college campuses, let's be honest, it's not going to stop anytime soon. Anti-Semitism is one of the world's oldest hatreds, and it's always been there. So I don't think that's going away anytime soon. But what is happening now is there is a peace deal that has happened, and hopefully much more to come. And we should all be very happy and looking forward with an open mind to what happens in the days and weeks to come here.
Well, Brian, we're sharing your joy. We appreciate you sharing time with us on this historic day. Great to speak with you, Brian Ladd.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Have a great day.
Great to have those insights there. And we are looking now live at Benjamin Netanyahu on the tarmac in Israel at the airport, Ben Gurion Airport, just as President Trump and his entourage have boarded the plane. And of course, President Trump is on his way to Egypt right now, where he will meet with other world leaders. Netanyahu is staying for a national holiday in Israel.
Truly a welcoming. You see the red carpet leading right up to Air Force One. People were yelling his name both in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and on the streets, thanking Trump for bringing the hostages home. And now he travels to Egypt, as you said, to try to carry forth the next stages and points of his 20-point plan, which of course is a demilitarization of Hamas and the beginning of rebuilding what has been destroyed in this campaign to bring the hostages home.
And this speaks to something that you had just covered with your interviewee, Brian Leib, just now about the Arab countries that are needed for the next phase of this peace agenda. And he was noting that Arab countries on the whole are likely not to want to invest in rebuilding Gaza unless Hamas is completely disarmed. And that's one of the key sticking points that they're still working through. But many people have wondered whether there may be a kind of second Abraham Accords, which of course started the process of normalizing Israel's relations with Arab nations.
That's right. And CNN was reporting that those who were arrested for violent crimes, terrorism, murder, that are being released are not being released to Palestine territories, not to Gaza, not to the West Bank. They're going to be deported to Egypt, and there will be a different fate for them rather than those who were just, non-violent offenders who had been picked up. So the prisoner swaps are underway. 2,000 are being released from Israeli jails for just 20 Israeli hostages, as well as the 25, unfortunately, dead bodies that await their proper respects and burial.
And I believe the estimate is around 250 of those are the prisoners with serious convictions, although without knowing, of course, the convictions of the others who've been detained, making up that 2,000.
So right now we're going to jump to a quick break, but we're going to be back. We're going to be covering this all day. President Trump heading to Egypt, where the summit is expected to take place. Stay with us. We'll be right back.